That mean now? Let's bring in retired LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. She's also the author of, quote, The Creation of a Manifesto, Black and Blue. It's good to have you with us. Sergeant, as always, what is your take on this situation? Let's start with, have you even heard of anything like this before? Like, just to get a reserve/auxiliary deputy onto the force, these types of shenanigans, if true?
No, I've never heard of such foolishness, and but for the fact that someone tragically lost their life, this would be comedy. To falsify the credentials of someone and put them in a sting operation because he just wants to play cop, like I said, it's unconscionable. And what kind of person, what does that say about Mr. Bates, that he would want to, he knew that he was was unqualified, that he, by his own admission, according to his written statement, had not fired his service revolver since the fall of 2014. Why would you want to insert yourself into such a highly charged environment? Who does that?
Now, when we talk about excessive force, and, in fair reporting on this, we don't know that it's true yet. We hear the reporting, we're vetting the reporting, but if it is true, people could look at this and say, well, this isn't what the problem is with excessive force. This is something else. However, do you see a through thread in how the police departments deal with situations when they come up, about whether they close ranks or whether they're open to this scrutiny?
Absolutely, it's about excessive force, and we understand that the problems that we see, like I said, they're systemic and they're cultural, right? And they are from the top down. When I say top down, I'm talking about the chief of police, because he understood what this man's situation was before he allowed him to go out into the field with these deputies on this sting operation. And then to hear that he's deputy of the year, are you kidding me? He's deputy of the year because he's the sugar daddy for that police department. And I just think it's terrible. And then I understand that initially there was going to be no review of this program. How many other pay-to-play deputies are out there? How many other volunteer deputies are out there that are unqualified and are daily jeopardizing the lives of the real police officers, as well as putting the community in harm's way?
Now, you also pointed out early on that while we're focused on Bates, you say, there was another guy involved in this, an undercover guy, that after Harris was shot, he had his knee on his head, and when Harris was saying, I'm losing my breath, he said, F your breath. To you, that's just as indicative of what we saw with Bates. Why?
Well, listen, because it speaks volumes to the inhumanity of those officers. Those officers understood that this man was possibly taking his last breaths. They knew that he had been shot, and then for them to be dishonest and say they never heard him say he couldn't breathe when we hear him screaming lets me know that they can't be trusted as well. And at the very minimum, we have an administrative disciplinary situation because it's unprofessional, it's callous. That's somebody's son, that's somebody's father. And to know that they spent the last moments of their life and the last thing they heard was someone tell their loved one, F your breath. Unconscionable.
Now, let's flip the scenario of perspective. You were on the job. You know the fear, you know the risk, you know the concern about whether you're going to get home to your family. That's what we're hearing from people in law enforcement, is that, you're looking at that guy with his knee on his head. I have to cuff him. I don't know if he's still dangerous. He just sold a weapon. He may have another one. Horrible things happen all the time. I'm in the moment. I'm scared. I'm angry that this guy is running from us. Are we not giving, when people criticize the actions of officers, are they not giving enough credit to the stress in the situation?
Listen, that's why we have the training that we have, and that's why we practice with one another before we go out into the field to conduct these kinds of operations. And so if you're scared, then maybe you should call the police, right? You don't get to do something that's inappropriate and then try to minimize and mitigate it by saying that I want to go home. I promise you, Mr. Harris had no gun in his neck. I've never seen a suspect in all my days carry a gun in his head. I've worked South Bureau operations crash where we dealt with gangsters. We did search warrants. We did sting operations. And like I said, escalation, de-escalation of force. You use that force necessary to take that person into custody. Once you have them contained, then you de-escalate. And you can take them to jail and allow them to have their dignity.
Right.
How about that?
Eric Harris on that issue, the police say, well, they thought he may have had one in his belt, that he wouldn't move his hands away from his waistband. Not obviously they thought it had it around his head or his neck. You're saying that because that's where the officer's knee was. One last point, though, Sergeant. People will say, don't run. You run, you trigger a series of events with a police officer that winds up bad 9 times out of 10. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, criticism, I don't know, but I always say comply, because you never know which officer you just pulled out of that bag of tricks. You don't know if you have a Tim Loman, like the one that killed Tamir Rice, or a Darren Wilson. So I always say comply and do what the officers say. But I mean, he did a bad thing and he was trying to get away. So that's inherent to police work. We know that people don't want to go to jail. We got to take them into custody, but we got to do it professionally, ethically, and morally right. And there's a way to do that. It happens every day. Police officers are doing their job the right way, and these few are giving the profession a black eye.
Well, it is, and it's a good perspective to have there. The overwhelming majority of officers, like when you were doing the job, are doing it the right way. We're focusing on the bad apples because that's how you cause change. Sergeant Dorsey, thank you very much. We'll continue the conversation. Poppy?
Well, it is day one of a life